Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Wyatt, and today I'll be teaching you how to script a hand-to system on Roblox. Okay, so before I show you how to make this script, I just want to show you how it works. So all we have to do is equip the tool that we want to give, and then if we type in the player's name that we want to give the tool to, and then press give, it'll give it to the player. Okay, so now that you know what this script does, I actually want to show you how to make it. So just a fair disclaimer before I start this video, this is a little bit more of a complex script. So if you'd like to, you can just grab the model from the description and use that and configure the two variables up top that relate to your group. But if you want to, you can always follow along. Maybe you'll learn something new along the way. So the first thing we're going to do to create this system is we're going to go under Starter GUI, and I'm just going to create a Screen GUI. And I'm just going to name it Hand to GUI. And then under this GUI, we want to have a text button and a text box. So I'm going to create a text box right here, and this is where we're actually going to put the player's name that we want to give the item to. So we'll size that down a little bit, and I'm just going to set the text to scaled. And I'm going to put the placeholder text in here just so that the player actually knows what this box does. So the placeholder text for this, I'm just going to say player name here, but you could put this to whatever placeholder text you'd like. From here, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to size it down a little, and I'm going to create a new text button underneath the Hand to GUI also. And I'm just going to set the size to the same as the text box, just that we have like a relative size type thing. And I'm going to set the text to scaled, just so that it scales for all screen resolutions. Position it right here, again, you can position it however you want. And I'll just put the text give so the players know what the button does. From here, what we want to do is give our GUI elements meaningful names. So this text box, I'm actually going to name it name box, just like this. And then this right here, this text button, I'm going to name it give button. And from here, we can actually get into coding it. That's all the UI design that we have to do. So I'm going to create a new local script under the Hand to GUI. And I'm just going to name this script Hand to script. Again, you could name it whatever you'd like. And in here, so that, again, as I said before, this is a little bit more complex. So if you'd like to copy and paste the script from the description or insert the model, feel free. But I'm going to go through this line by line and explain exactly what everything does. So the first thing that we want to do is get a reference to our local player. So I'm just going to say local player equals game.players.localPlayer. And then I also want to get a reference to our Hand to GUI. So Hand to GUI equals script.parent. So if this is our Hand to script, script.parent is equal to that GUI object right there. From here, I want to get a reference to our name box and our give button. So I'll create variables for those. So local name box equals Hand to GUI. We'll use our previous variable .namebox. And local give button equals Hand to GUI.give button. Just like that. And that's actually all of our variables up top that have to pertain to our UI elements. Now the next two variables are really important for your group because what they do is they basically say if the player is in the group and if they're of a certain rank, it'll show this UI. If they're not in the group and of that rank, it won't show the UI. So this is really useful for groups that have like a trainee rank where maybe you want to show the UI to trainees but you don't want to show it to customers. So that's why we need these following parameters. So the first one is the group ID variable, and this is basically whatever group you own the group ID for it. So I'm actually just going to go and I'm going to grab my group ID. Okay, so my group ID is right here. You can set this to whatever your group ID is. And the next variable I'm going to create is the minimum rank to use GUI. So this is the minimum rank. So if you want the minimum rank to be trainee, and trainee has the rank ID of 2, you'd put 2 here. If you want it to be admin, and the minimum rank ID for admin is 254, you want to put 254. So whatever rank ID for the minimum rank in your group you want for the UI to show up for, that's what you put this variable at. From here, what we're going to do is we're actually going to set it up so it will destroy the GUI if they're not of that rank or above. So I'll say if player :getRankInGroup, call the getRankInGroup method of the player, in group, not just group. And in here, we're going to pass in the group ID. So we'll say group ID is less than minimum rank. So if it's less than, then we want to get rid of the UI. We don't want to display it for the player. So I'm just going to say Hand to GUI :destroy. And this is the best way to do it to make sure exploiters can't open the UI or anything if we just destroy the UI right off the bat. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function And this function, we're not going to use it just yet, but we're going to use it later on. And what this does is it gets the player's partial name and it'll return their full name. So let's say my name is OrangeDude4221. Well, if I want a player to be able to type in this box orange and my name to automatically fill and automatically send the item to my player, this is why we need that function, because it's going to get OrangeDude4221 is what it'll return from OrangeDude if we pass that in. So I'm going to say local function get player from partial name, just like that. And then we're going to pass in the partial name parameter as our only argument. And I'm going to create a new variable, so local found name equals nil. And this is where we're actually going to store the name if we find the player under players. If we don't find the player, we're just going to return nil. But if we do find the player with part of the name, then we're going to return the player's name. So I'm going to get a reference to the players folder. So local players equals game.players::get_players. And this will just return all the players in the table. And now I'm going to loop through the players. So I'm going to say for I equals 1, common number of players. This is just a basic for loop. Do local possible player equals players I. So this gets the possible player. So the player that we're looping through, that current player in the index, that's what we're actually getting with this variable. And then we're just going to do an if statement. This is a long if statement, so just pay attention and make sure you don't mess this up. Basically, all this is going to check is we're going to put both of the names to lowercase just in case somebody got the capitals and lowercases mixed up. And then we're going to check to see if the inserted name, if the partial name is found, if it's part of the string of the possible player's name. So I know that sounds confusing, but just follow along and it'll work. So if we say if string.find, and then our first argument is going to be string.lower, and we're going to pass in the possible player dot name. So if in this string we find string.lower, if we get the lower of the partial name, just like that, then we actually want to continue and we want to basically say this is the found name. We found exactly who the player is that we want to hand it to. So I'm just going to say found name equals possible player.name, just like that. And then down here what we want to do is we actually want to return it. So if the possible player is actually a player, if the partial name, we can find that player, we're going to return the found name. Otherwise, we'll return nil. So I'm just going to say if not found name, then return nil. We don't return anything. Otherwise, we want to return found name. I know that part was a little bit confusing, so you can pause it here and look in the description to get the code, but this is probably the most difficult part of the video, so good job if you were able to follow along. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to hook into the mouse button one click event of our give button, so get when the button's clicked. So I'm just going to say give button, use our variable, mouse button one click, connect that up to a function. And then in that function, we're actually going to do the processing. So give it, if the player's found, we'll give it to them. We're going to do a few other checks to make sure it's actually not an exploiter and it's a person, a few other things, just to make sure that our users have the best experience possible. So the first thing we want to do is actually check if the player's holding a tool. Because the way this works is if you're holding a tool, then you can give it to another player. So we actually need to see, is the player even holding a tool? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to say if not player.character : find first child, which is I know that's a long one, tool, then, and let me just explain this. So whenever you equip a tool, it goes into the player's character object. So we're saying if, basically, we're saying the opposite. So if player.character, if there's a tool underneath the character, then we don't want to do anything. But if there is not a tool underneath the character, then we want to tell the user that they need to equip a tool. So we're going to say namebox.text equals nothing, and then we're going to set the placeholder text of the namebox. So namebox.placeholder text equals equip a tool first, put an exclamation point on there. We're going to wait one, and then we're going to set that text back to what it was before. So namebox.placeholder text equals player name here. After this, what we want to do, we're going to do another check, and all this check is doing is making sure that the player actually inserted a name in the text and they didn't just put nothing there and press give. So we're going to say if namebox right here, and we need a variable before this, my bad. We're going to make a variable called namebox_text, and all that's equal to is namebox.text. And now we can actually do that check. So if namebox_text is not equal to nothing, so if it's equal to something, if something was specified in that name box that we had over here, then we're going to want to run this code. So what we'll say is local player name, the player name of who we want to give it to, equals, we're going to call our function that we created earlier, get player from partial name, and we'll pass in the namebox_text. So if I type orange in here, it's going to call this function, and it's going to pass in orange there. And then if I'm in the game, if orange dude 4221 is in the game, it's going to return orange dude 4221 with the capitals and everything. It's going to return the exact name of the player. So local player name, we have that variable set up. And now we actually want to check to make sure the player exists. So if it returns right here, if this code runs, so if player name, then we'll just print found player. Otherwise, we're just going to print player. We'll print player does not exist. So first we're going to set up what happens inside this else right here. So if the player does not exist, we'll say namebox.text equals nothing, just as we did up here. And I'm actually just going to copy this code because it's very similar. And instead of setting it to equip a tool first, we're going to set it to player not found because we couldn't find any players. So player not found, and then we're going to set the text back after 1 second. And you can change this interval if you'd like, if you want your players to see it for longer. I just do 1 second because it's easiest for me. So in here, now we can actually go in. This is the last part of the script, is to set up what happens if we actually find the player. So all we're going to do is say game.replicatedStorage. We're going to fire a remote event. And I know we didn't create the event yet, but we're going to create it in a second. So game.replicatedStorage.givePlayerItem, and we're going to fire the server, and then we're going to pass in the player name, that variable we created with the player we want to give it to. And I'm going to create that variable or the remote event under replicated storage right now. So if I just click the plus button right there, and then I grab the remote event object, and we're just going to name this givePlayerItem, so we can catch that from the server whenever we fire it. So we fire the event, and then we want to tell the player that we actually gave the item to the other player. And we're going to use the same code once again as we did. I should probably turn that into a function, but we only use it 3 times. And I have a 3 times rule. You know, you can use it 3 times, and then you have to turn it into a function. So we're just going to leave it like that for now. And instead of saying player not found, this time we're just going to print gave, or we're going to set the text to gave. And then once again, we're going to set it back to player name here so they can continue using the UI. So that's it for the local script. Congratulations if you've made it this far. I know it's tough to follow along sometimes. But now we can actually go to the server script, and this is the really easy part. It's like, what is it? It's 4 lines. So I'll create a new server script under server script service, and I'm just going to name it, let's see, what should I name it? I will name it givePlayerItem, and then we're just going to say on line 1, so game.replicatedStorage.givePlayerItem.onServerEvent, and we'll connect it to a function. And all this is doing, we're hooking into when this event right here in replicated storage is fired. And then we're just going to get the player name. That's going to be the player and the player name. Those are the objects we're going to grab. The next line of this is tool to give, so local tool to give. All this is doing is actually getting the tool that we want to give to the player. So we're finding the first child underneath the player object. We're going to use that same wacko function that we used earlier. So if we find a child that's a tool underneath the player's character, then we're just going to set the parent to the other player's backpack and move the tool over because we're giving it to the player. So local tool to give equals player.character : find first child, which is a longest method ever on Roblox, tool. And then we're going to say tool to give dot parent equals game.players player name. So this just gets the player with the name, the player that we want to give it to. It gives us that player object dot backpack, and that's it. All you have to do, double check your code in the description, of course, because I have to paste it in, but that's all you have to do to make this work. So implementing a system like this would be really useful for a cafe or for a hotel or any situation where you want players to be able to give tools to each other. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you learned something new today about scripting on Roblox. As always, I have the Paysaman link with the code and the Roblox model link with all the assets shown in this video in the description, and I'll see you guys later.